All right, good morning or afternoon personal finance class. So at this point, if you're still following with me, you are done the credit topic, which moves us on to budgeting. Now, budgeting is arguably the most important thing with your personal finance as you grow older. This is, one of the really key things to planning your money, especially once you start having more and more expenses. So, one of the biggest mistakes people make, and young adults and old adults make, is assuming that we are spending less than we are making. And that can be a very dangerous assumption. So, it is really important to have some form of budget and to revisit that and see how your expenses and how your spending lines up with your planned budget. All right, so by the end of this lesson, we're going to be talking about the difference between needs and wants. And eventually we'll be working towards learning about the difference between fixed and variable expenses and looking out kind of the general steps on how to prepare a budget. And you guys will actually be taking some time to research various expenses and create a template of a budget for yourself. So the idea behind a budget is that we all make typically a fixed amount of money, right? Once you get part-time job, full-time job, salary, you're typically making, a relatively fixed amount of money. And for most of us, we can't afford everything we need and want, which means the idea behind a budget is to start to actually plan and prioritize your spending, okay? For most people, we don't have the luxury of just buying everything we want and everything we need, and that's still being less than our income. So we need to prepare a little bit of a plan, and that's essentially what a budget is. Okay, it's a plan for your money so that you can create kind of a goal so that you know you're going to be spending less than what you are making. So the first thing when you start to think about your budget is to really consider your needs and your wants. So this is probably pretty self-explanatory. Needs are items that are going to be considered essential to sustaining life. So your food, water, shelter, clothing, etc. Your wants are things that you'd like to have, but not necessarily essential. So that might be your Slurpees in the middle of the day or in the summer. That could be a morning coffee or a Starbucks coffee especially. That could be a new iPhone, brand name clothing, etc. Now, this may seem really clear, needs versus wants, right? Necessities versus luxuries. But oftentimes it can be kind of difficult to distinguish between the two. Number one, because the world is kind of changing, right? Maybe something like a phone or internet at one point was not a need, but it almost is nowadays, right? I'm sure many of you are experiencing maybe internet shortages and device shortages, and that can arguably, in some cases, especially for adults, be working its way into the need category. The other reason it can be kind of difficult to distinguish between needs and wants is because of the marketing world, right? We are consumers in an economy where there is, market pressure to buy certain things. So, businesses do a good job of trying to convince us that we need things, even though we may not. So we, of course, need water. And contrary to what, you may believe, we do not truly need coffee. Okay. We need shelter, but we don't truly need a large house. We need clothing, but it does not truly need to be brand name. Now, obviously, depending on your expendable income, you might be able to afford some of those other things, but they are really more wants and luxuries. So sometimes the line between needs and wants becomes blurry, right? With things like computers and phones and internet. So that is where it's really important to make some financial decisions and know where you might be spending some of your extra money into the more of the want category. So that's where a budget will help. A budget will help you make sure you're taking care of your needs and then planning and prioritizing where that money goes towards your wants. Okay, So truly, what is a budget? Now, by definition, a budget is an itemized document that helps you control your cash flow by estimating income, expenses, and savings over a specified period of time. So budget is a very kind of generic term. Businesses can have budgets. An individual person can have a budget. You could have a family budget. You could have a wedding budget. You could have, an organization itself could have a budget. The government has a budget. So, a lot of different levels of people can carry a budget, and it can be over different periods of time. So there's monthly budgets. You can have yearly budgets. You could have a weekly budget if you wanted. All right. You could have a 5-year plan budget. So for this particular course, we're going to be working on kind of personal budgets for our personal expenses, and we're mostly going to be dealing with monthly. Okay. So budgets can really help, individual people as well as families to make sure they're living within their means and don't run into massive credit debt, which we talked about in the last topic, right? Sometimes people get themselves into really dangerous loan situations and they don't even know how they got there. They start taking out loans and you don't really realize where your money's going. Okay, sometimes those people just never lived with a budget and they didn't know, they didn't know where their money was going. Okay, so a budget can really help you plan how you're going to allocate your money and track how well you're sticking to that plan. So there really are 2 steps to a budget. Number 1, making it, and then number 2, figuring out where your spending lines up with that. So budgets involve income, expenses, and savings. So income is going to be any money that you receive. This is going to typically for most people just include your regular pay or salary. Could also include, especially for young people, like any gift money or allowance. All right. It's really important. You can consider gross income on a budget, but really you need to make sure you're budgeting based off of your net income. Okay. You don't want to budget based off your gross income because a lot of that money then gets lost to deductions. Expenses are anything that's going to be spent or it's outgoing money. So income is truly kind of positive. And then from that, we subtract any expenses and we hope that our overall balance after doing that is positive, right? You don't want, if you're carrying a negative balance on your budget, you need to readjust. Okay, at this point, I want you guys to do the budgeting assignment number 1. You'll find that on Edsby. It's going to be about kind of analyzing needs versus wants and practicing creating a simple budget for a case study. All right, we'll go from there. Thanks. Bye.